devotees in that stage. So, Raganuga Bhakti, or hearing about the gopis, for those who are qualified. But as you know from listening to Prabhupada's lectures, he spoke and went through the whole Bhagavatam. He didn't isolate the gopis. Although spontaneous loving devotional service is the goal, to practice it in the conditioned stage is risky. Still, devotees free of unwanted habits may try, but they should do so carefully under able guidance. So one of the things we learn is that anyone who practices Raganuga Bhakti, externally you wouldn't know it, because they follow perfectly all the principles. In Vaidhi Bhakti, you follow the principle because you're supposed to. In Raganuga Bhakti, you follow it because you have an eagerness to follow it. So just the reason why you do it is different. You get up out of bed in the morning because you're supposed to. You may not want to. Raganuga Bhakti, it's different. The motive is, I'm so eager for service and for connection with Krishna. So that's what's motivating you. And it's natural. Spontaneous devotees, by their eagerness for the topics they have heard and read, absorb themselves in such subjects. Through the agency of the purified mind, they become both observers and tasters of Krishna's pleasure sports. This means that in meditating on Krishna's exchange with the gopis, the observer tastes the conjugal mood of a gopi. This is substantiated by Prabhupada in the above verse. One should serve the Supreme Lord with a feeling similar to that of his associates, and one should place himself under the direct guidance of a particular associate. That's called Raganuga Bhakti. So when you're in Raganuga Bhakti, you have a certain mood that develops that's similar to the mood of someone leading devotee in the particular rasa that you're attracted to. So how could you have that mood if you're not elevated? Right? So you're eager to have that mood, you're reading about it, you're absorbed in it, you're attracted by it, you can't stop thinking about it. Obviously something's going on with that particular rasa in you. There's so much of an attraction, so naturally you become a little overcome by that mood, and your practice of bhakti changes internally, it changes. So maybe you'll see, in that stage, you'll see a picture of Krishna in a certain rasa, and that picture will just be like, your heart will start melting. And before that, you just saw the picture and you said, that's a nice picture. And then you looked at the next picture. There's Gop Kumar, and there's Jasoda, and then there's the rasa dance. And none of them particularly captured you, but on this stage, one of those is going to capture you, and one devotee is going to capture you, and you're going to feel it. And like in the Japa retreat, when we had the picture of Gop Kumar, and I said, you can replace yourself with Gop Kumar. You can be embraced. So probably those of you who are in Sakya Ras felt it more. Oh, I guess if you're in Madhurya Ras, you could replace yourself. You could also. Now, I think also an important factor is you might, by studying our philosophy, believe that we're all manjaris, or we're all supposed to be in Madhurya Ras, because that's what Lord Chaitanya came to give. He glorifies the gopis. The acharyas, most all the acharyas are Madhurya Ras, that's what they talk about. But that's not necessarily true. You may not be in that rasa. So, some of you might be thinking, I should cultivate Madhurya Rasa because I'm supposed to be in that rasa.
But in Shaiva Dhamma, is describing first Sakya Ras and then Madhurya Ras, and he said anybody can be.
Yeah, it's not exact. Yeah, that's why. Anyway, not exactly the way Prabhupada gave it to us. Anyway, the point is that Madhurya Ras, it's not that everyone's in Madhurya Ras. Generally, in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it's Sakya Ras and Madhurya Ras. That's generally where you'll find followers of Balaram, the followers of Radharani. Yes?
There's one part in that devotion where Prabhupada explains the rasas, and I studied it carefully because I done that.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, what I was understanding from the way Prabhupada presented it was different from what I thought about the rasa. Because what I thought is that, you have one rasa and that's your rasa, like you said. And then Prabhupada talks about it, he starts with the lower rasas, and then he says, for example, that when dasi rasa becomes mature, then another element.
That's what she's saying.
Friendship comes in, and then you go to sakya rasa, and when it matures, then it becomes more affectionate, and then, it seems like you're moving up the ladder of the rasa.
Yeah, the way I understand it is that, as you know, everything is present in Madhurya Rasa. And for example, the friendship is present in Madhurya Rasa, and Vatsalya is present in Madhurya Rasa, and servitude. And and the gopis' friendship with Krishna is deeper than the cowherd boys' friendship. So, that's my understanding of how that works. But elevating step by step, I mean, you could say that you could say it in Vaidhi. You start as servant. We all start as servant. So you could say it that way. But if the meaning is that we all end up in Madhurya Rasa, but Lord Chaitanya didn't come just to give that. So then we'd have to justify that or understand that. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said he came to give 4 rasas. But as I was saying, generally you see Madhurya Ras and Sakya Ras. So you'd have to balance that with that understanding. And from the way we understand Raganuga Bhakti, it's never explained that, well, first cultivate servitorship, and then cultivate friendship, then cultivate parental, and then cultivate. It's always, you will cultivate what you're attracted to. So, that's the way I understand it. I mean, servitorship is there in friendship, and friendship is there in Vatsalya, as well as servitorship. And servitorship and friendship and Vatsalya is there in Madhurya. That's the way I understand it. But cultivating them separately, that would go against the principle of Raganuga Bhakti. Because Raganuga Bhakti is never explained like that. And you cultivate one to cultivate the next. But Sakya may not grow into anything more than that, or servitorship may not grow if that's not your rasa. So then how do we understand that? Or is that part of the idea? That it'll grow to where you are? Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, not everyone is in Madhurya Rasa. Not everyone is Manjari. That's for sure. And you see in Prabhupada's books, he definitely mentions that. Because he talks about, a lot of times he talks about the relationship that you want to cultivate. And he speaks of any of those. This pastime is for those who want to, especially attracted by those who want to cultivate this relationship in this mood. So. I would say that makes sense if you're in Madhurya Ras, or for whatever rasa you're in, it makes sense, because the lower is in the higher, so it could foster that in the practice of bhakti as you're coming. But definitely, when you come to Bhava, it's there. Whatever it is, you will know. So that has to be taken into consideration and balanced. What do you say? I mean, what do you think? I'm not challenging you.
Yeah, it makes sense. The different moods can also transform. It's just like even we have experience here that there may be a friendship that initially, say, between a man and
Yeah.
woman, it can be a relationship,
Platonic.
But who a disciple can change a disciple. So it looks like rasa basa, but you see how the
Yeah,
love
yeah,
can change
yeah.
form.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. 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 So everything's dynamic, and yeah, like you have different kinds of friends. And some friends, what she's saying is some friends, they send messages from Krishna, they take messages from Krishna and they give them to the gopis, so they're actually involved in helping Madhurya Ras. And Mother Yasoda has Radharani cook for Krishna, so she's being involved in Madhurya Ras. But that doesn't affect their relationship with Krishna. It's still friendship or parental. It's just the service is different, it's more intimate. And even sometimes the gopis are jealous of Krishna because the cowherd, jealous of the cowherd boys because in public, cowherd boys and Krishna can just hug. It's not a problem, and they can't do that. So we can work backwards down also. And then, as we're saying, the gopis, they have parental affection also. And they have friendship, which is even stronger than the friends and the gopis in parental affection. But Mother Yasoda's parental affection is as strong as Radharani's affection for Krishna. She has Mahabhav, so that's special. So the affection of certain friends of Krishna, that may be equal or almost like the gopis. So everything's dynamic. And as Prabhupada said, if you really want to understand it all, you'll have to go there. Or you could just attain the stage of Bhava, because in the stage of Bhava, the Samvit Shakti works, and the Samvit Shakti reveals everything, because it's knowledge. As we said a few days ago, you're full of chit. But you don't realize you're full of chit until you come to Bhava, where the Samvit potency takes over. You're all full of chit. That's all I can say. So the point that's being made here, you understand the teachings in completeness. You see some things that indicate one thing, you see some things that indicate another thing. Then you want to study what Prabhupada taught, how he applied it. And then, as followers of Prabhupada, follow that. And then when someone else says something, you say, okay, that may be valid in a particular situation or time, but this is what Srila Prabhupada taught. That's our duty. And that's why my godbrother said, when you go outside, you're going to get a little different picture of Prabhupada. And then they'll say something like, well, he taught that because we weren't ready for it, but now we're ready for it, so he would have taught this. Things like that. And we, as followers of Prabhupada, we can't guess what he would have done. Right? We can only go by what he did. You know, then you get, well, this is why he did it, and this is why he withheld it. But that's not the way the thing is, if Prabhupada had said that I'm giving you this until I leave, and then after I leave, then this is the next level, then okay, that makes sense. But he didn't say it. And then what about all the new people who aren't ready for the next level? And how do you know when someone's ready for the next level? So I think Prabhupada, if you study his teachings, he was very careful not to go that route. But his route was follow these principles, and it'll all be revealed to you. And if it's not revealed, I will reveal it to you from within you. But stick to this mission. These are the principles. This is the mission. We want to spread Krishna consciousness. Here in my books, I teach about the practice of Raga Nuga Bhakti. When you're ready, you can do it. And it will be revealed. Everything will be revealed. We were told that Bhakti Sri Swami asked Prabhupada that question. Will it be revealed? And Prabhupada said, if it's not revealed to you, through your bhakti, I'll reveal it to you. So the Prabhupada can do that from within. Is that okay? Still have two? So I think that's a very important point.
So, but that would mean when we are not initiated by Prabhupada, that our Guru would reveal it.
Prabhupada can reveal it to you. You're his disciple. Why not? Spontaneous devotional service directly cultivates attachment to Krishna and an eagerness for perfection. When hankering for direct service to Krishna becomes supremely intense, devotees' torrential tears induce the Lord to bestow his mercy. The mercy then reveals the devotee's spiritual form, Siddhadeha, which includes their relationship, Sthai Bhav. Then by engaging in systematic realized worship in ecstasy and then love, devotees cultivate their constitutional relationship until the mellow of their devotion becomes full-blown. Okay. Here's the controversy. Are you awake? I said the word controversy. That's supposed to wake you up. In both Harinam Chintamani and Jaiva Dharma, Thakur Bhaktivinoda indicates that a fully realized soul sometimes reveals to a qualified disciple the aforementioned 11 ingredients of spiritual identity in order to facilitate the disciple's meditation. That means your name, your age, your service, the group you're in, the color of your dress. What else? You know what else? Complexion. Yeah. Your leader, like that. So it's not vague.
Your service.
Yeah. Everything's good. Nonetheless, even when these ingredients conform in detail to the disciple's spiritual identity. The meditation of the conditioned souls are but material facsimiles of the reality. In other words, knowing about the spiritual body through the materially molded mind cannot invoke the spiritual body. Until the spiritual identity manifests, devotees cannot cultivate rasa. So if I tell you this is your rasa, it doesn't really mean anything because it has to actually be revealed to you. Otherwise you're not qualified to understand it. You just understand it with your head. But you don't see it. You don't experience it. So you can think you're a peacock and practice. Or whatever. But when you are and you become qualified, that's different. That's the point. You can't cultivate it, Haribol. You can't cultivate it until it's revealed. Like, how could you cultivate a particular rasa if you're not experiencing it? If you don't know who you are in that rasa, then it's like Leela Shakti, you are so-and-so Manjari, you're 11 years old, you're this and that. Now you go around, oh, I'm so-and-so Manjari. But if you're still within the modes of nature, you can't cultivate that because it's just an idea.
Once I translated one very elaborated sannyasi and his disciple discussion, and he said to me, like, she is a gopi. And like very silently, very deep, and I still thinking, is it really?
Well, sometimes you can kind of tell by a devotee's inclination, but actually who you are, what your service is, that's different. I mean, there are many who've been given Siddhadeha who have 10 girlfriends, so...
No, I mean ISKCON.
Yeah, you can see by inclination. Right? I once told my wife, I think I'm in Sakya Ras, and she got mad at me. She says, get away from me. I don't want to be around someone in Sakya Ras. You can't be in Sakya Ras. That's horrible. So she has a very strong inclination for Madhurya Rasa. It's not that she's seeing her form, it's just she has that strong. So if you ask me what my wife is, I could say, yeah, she's a gopi. Because she shows all the inclination, even to the point she actually got upset. It was like looking at some food, that makes you sick. When I told her that, it actually made her sick. She said, I can't be married to someone Sakya Ras. And I just say, I'm just somehow or other, at this point in my devotional service, I'm just attracted to Sakya. I don't know. I'm just very attracted. She got over it. She's okay now. So if I say she's a gopi, it doesn't mean I know. It's just that's the tendency she exhibits at this stage in her devotional service. And maybe she hasn't got over it. I don't know. Maybe she'll divorce me and go, why? Because he's in Sakya Ras. I can't deal with it. Attainment of one's spiritual form is a process of revelation, avaroha panta. No one can attain it by the empiric process, or even by sadhana. Therefore, those who falsely imagine they are liberated are offenders. Among many kinds of sahajiyas, 2 are sad examples of the mockery that the so-called attainment of one's siddhadeha has become. The Siddha Pranali Babajis and the Saki Beki Sahajiyas. The former group deviates by imagining that their mentally conceived form is spiritual. They think that by practicing sadhana, they are directly cultivating rasa with Krishna. It's saying they're imagining. It's not a revelation. It's an imagination. You think you think you're on a certain level and you're not. I think I'm a gopi and I start practicing like I am. The latter imagine their gross body to be spiritual and thus suitable for tasting rasa in direct service from Krishna. And then you sometimes see men dressed up as gopis. So they come in this group and they think, Krishna's attracted to the material body. I'm in Madhurya Rasa, so I'll dress up like a girl. And Krishna will come and enjoy my body. Obviously, Krishna doesn't enjoy the bodies, our bodies. So we'll end here. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Oh, we have a question here. Can a neophyte in bhajana kriya be captured by a certain rasa? Or can that only happen at higher stages? I think we answered that. Was that captured or captivated? You won't be captured, but you could be captivated. But just because you're captivated by one rasa doesn't mean you're in that rasa. You know, we should be captivated by all the rasas. And one day you'll be captivated by one. And you won't have to force it, you just will be. See, you know what Prabhupada said? After this whole Gopi Bhava thing, Prabhupada, he said, this could turn into Sahajiyism. And then he said, if we cultivate this Gopi Bhav on the level we're on, it'll stop the preaching. We'll just sit around and think we're floating up somewhere, high in Krishna consciousness. And he said the result will be we'll stop preaching. That's interesting. Because he felt that if we did that, we would end up being like the Babajis who engage in illicit activity and just hang out in Radhakund. So that was Prabhupada's comment. It'll ruin the preaching. So, you realize how hard Prabhupada pushed us to preach? Like, really hard. Relentlessly. So this kind of cultivation was really out of, there's a word in English. When something is just out of place, another thing, out of context, yes, but there's another word I'm thinking of. It's not consistent with the way that person is. No, it's like out of place for that. There's a word, I can't remember. Out of sync, but some other word. It's not what you would expect from that person. It's not indicative of how they did things. So the Prabhupada was, what you got from him, the energy you got from him was push the movement, save people, push it, more books, more temples. Also you got cultivate your bhakti, definitely, but not at the cost of pushing on Krishna consciousness. You balance both of them. And he was afraid that if there was emphasis immaturely on higher levels of bhakti, then we would sit around trying to cultivate something we weren't qualified for. We would end up getting all the girls that were listening to the Gopi Bhav pregnant, and everything would be ruined. He said that. So that was his analysis. Yeah. So he was very careful that we be qualified for what we do. I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, yeah, when, yeah. Okay, now I can tell you some interesting stories. Now we're going overtime for interesting stories. You know this song, Sri Rupa Manjari Pada? Sri Rupa Manjari. Rupa Manjari is the most intimate of the servants who can be with Radha and Krishna when they have their leelas. And Rupa Manjari, of course, is Rupa Goswami. And this song, Sri Rupa Manjari Pada, the lotus feet of Rupa Manjari, my life and soul. It's a very intimate song. So I was once, maybe 25 years ago, staying at a guest house. It was in Puri. There was no ISKCON guest house. It was a Gaudiya Math guest house. And so we went to their temple and they were doing bhajan. And I asked them, can you chant this song? And I was just curious to find out if they sang it in the same melody that we sang it. Sri Rupa Manjari Pada Sei Mora Sampada Sei Mora Bhojana Puja. And they said, when I asked them to sing it, they said, we're not allowed to sing this song. They said, only our gurus can sing it. Isn't that interesting? We were told by some of the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta that there were certain parts of CC and Bhagavatam, either they wouldn't read, or when they read, there was no discussion, they just read through it. It was intimate leelas with the gopis. Govinda Lilamrita, they were not given. Ujjvala Nilamani, they were not given to read. I had heard one of Prabhupada's godbrothers speak, and he was speaking some philosophy. And in speaking philosophy, it kind of morphed into some discussion of the gopis. And then he went off for like 2 minutes on the glories of the gopis. And then he stopped and he apologized. He said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoken like that. 2 minutes just speaking of Gopi Leela, and he apologized. So that really shows how they were trained by Bhaktisiddhanta to be very careful. Can you imagine apologizing? He was like, I was 32 years old. He must have been like 90 or something. And he's apologizing for speaking for 2 minutes about the gopis. So they're very, very careful about how they dealt with these topics. And this was one of the most senior and respected disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta. And they were asking him about these books, Govinda Lilamrita, Ujjvala Nilamani. He said something. He said, I've only heard these things, I never read them. We were not allowed to read them. So it's very strict. It was too intimate for us. So. And one thing I think is really important to understand is that if you study Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's life and you study Prabhupada's life, you'll see how Prabhupada exactly understood the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta. So if you understand Prabhupada's mood, you understand Bhaktisiddhanta's mood, because Prabhupada perfectly represented it. You know that book that Bhaktivikas Swami came out with, it details the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and if you read that book, you understand exactly what Prabhupada was doing, how he understood how Bhaktisiddhanta, he took everything from Bhaktivinoda Thakur and then massaged it into a form that was good for people today. And then Prabhupada understood that, and he did the same thing. So, if we're understanding exactly what Prabhupada did, then we're right in line with Bhaktisiddhanta. So that's important. So that's an important lesson for today. That, there may be many acharyas speaking many things, but we always want to understand it. How did Prabhupada explain it? Is that all right? When you hear from people outside of ISKCON, they may or may not explain it exactly how Prabhupada explained it. That's the problem. Because they don't necessarily feel impelled to exactly represent Prabhupada as impelled as we feel. I'm not saying they wouldn't represent him, but occasionally it may not be represented exactly the way we would represent it. Okay, I better stop before I get in trouble. Oh, we have another question. Our devotees, a bhajan, a kriya, can at all think about their Sarup Siddhi? No. Why would they? They can hardly keep their diapers on. You know, sometimes Prabhupada, they say, Prabhupada, what's my rasa? They said, your rasa is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. You know, just to, like bring it down to reality. You're worried about your rasa, and this is your rasa. And sometimes Prabhupada was very direct, and your rasa is that you're thinking about having sex with that girl. He didn't say it in those terms, but more or less that's what he said. Yeah, you're thinking about rasa, that's your rasa. So, you had some? Prabhupada was more lenient. In some ways more lenient, in some ways more strict. I think in some ways more strict because of seeing what had happened in his spiritual master's mission. So he was very strict about the GBC, and he emphasized that. He was very strict about what we're talking about now, about not deviating philosophically. But in terms of accepting us and our faults, more liberal. And Prabhupada encouraged us even though we didn't do so well. And if he made us feel useless, we probably wouldn't be here now. We would have just given up. So he always accepted our service. He let us get married and then still be temple presidents and preach. He let sannyasis who fell come back and take up their service. He didn't discriminate. We had devotees who were gay, engaged them in service. He engaged the women in very similar ways as the men. These are all very liberal things. But in other ways, very strict. One time there was a lot of trouble in our movement. And we were going out on Harinam Sankirtan late in the evening. And so Prabhupada said, stop going out. Just stay back in the evening. He wouldn't let us go out in the evening. This was 1970. So in that sense he was strict, because we were fragile. So he would be strict with us because we were weak, and we could easily get contaminated. Or, he was very careful about us hearing from his godbrothers, because our faith was weak and our knowledge was limited. And so in that sense he was strict. That we don't become misguided. We were very weak, so he was, emphasized sadhana. Get up, Mangal Arti, 16 rounds. It's very strictly, fanatically strict, because we're weak. But if devotees didn't follow it or fell down, he never rejected them. Come back, do your service. So in that sense, liberal. You know that story of this boy, I think he was in his late 20s, early 30s. he was coming to the temple when I was coming to the temple. This is 1969. And so he comes to the temple, and he'd come to the temple in a dhoti. He'd wear a saffron dhoti. And then one day he showed up in a sari. It was like a real shock. And he was talking like a woman, in a high voice. He was still hanging out with us in the brahmacharya ashram. It would have shocked the women more if he was hanging out with them. But it was still a shock. But then, like the next time he came to the temple, he came in a dhoti. And then later he came in a sari. So just to show you how liberal Prabhupada was, the temple president wrote, he said, Prabhupada, what should we tell him? Because sometimes he's coming as a brahmachari, sometimes he's coming as a woman. And Prabhupada wrote a letter to that boy, and he said, just decide what you are and stick to it. He didn't say decide to be a man, being this woman is crazy. He said just decide what you are and stick to it and take to Krishna consciousness. So that's the liberal part of Prabhupada, is the acceptance, all-inclusiveness. But the strict part is the path. Because he knew that in our state, we have to be very strict, because we're very susceptible to Maya. I told that story the other day. This one devotee, Devarshi, he had taken so much LSD, he was so spaced out, it took him all day to chant his rounds. Literally the whole day. So they asked Prabhupada, what are we going to do about Devarshi? Should we let him live in the temple because he doesn't do any service? All he can do is chant his rounds. It takes him all day. Prabhupada said, let him. Just that's all he can do, then let him do that. So that's Prabhupada's liberal nature. Yes?
And what was after with this divorce? After a while?
He got better. Well, there are many people that came that were, their minds were very splayed out from drugs. And they all the ones I knew were fine after a while, a few months, a few weeks. Some of them, you wouldn't know today how spaced out they were. Today, you'd see them, they're like a genius. But then they were very, very spaced out. So, he was very strict about preaching. He knew that we needed to preach. That was very important for us. Not just for spreading Krishna consciousness, but for us. Very careful about us associating with people outside of ISKCON, especially people in Radhakund. And he was right. We lost devotees. And he understood Bhaktisiddhanta, and he preserved Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's some of his own disciples rejected him because they were convinced that he had deviated. If you can believe that. So Prabhupada preserved something very carefully, and he handed it to us. And it's such a shame if we don't preserve it and we adulterate it. After he preserved it so carefully, we read this book and come up with this philosophy which is not what he taught. He said, well, but Bhaktivinoda taught it, and Vishwanath Chakravarti taught. Maybe they did, but that's not exactly the way Prabhupada taught it. And so we have to preserve that. So that's very important. Otherwise, in the future, we won't have what Prabhupada gave us. And you can read Prabhupada's books and you could come up with a lot of ideas that are not what he means. Especially if you add in commentaries of other acharyas that were spoken long before Prabhupada and not learned through him. Then it can get quite confusing and deviating. Is that okay? So we're going to stop. We went overtime. Went 20 minutes overtime, but it was worth it. Yeah. How many of you are depressed now? You had your ticket to Radhakund and now you're not going? Still going. My lecture failed. But anyway. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Jai Prabhupada.
I'm not listening to